welcome along to the unit analysis series. In this series, I look at the history of the unit, and in the second part of the video, I'll look at how the unit is represented and plays in the game itself. Today, we are looking at elephants. Elephants are a very dynamic unit, and they add a lot to the game. They look wonderful. They add quite a lot of unpredictability to battles, which is always nice to see. And they're one of my favourite units, and they deserve to be included in this series. A brief historical overview of elephants. Elephants were once the most feared sight on a battlefield. The massive beasts, often measuring 3 meters tall and weighing up to 4 tons, were a devastating physical weapon capable of goring and crushing enemy fighters. But the elephants were also a tremendous psychological weapon. Soldiers encountering war elephants for the first time were known to turn and flee in the face of such formidable destructive power. Elephants were often utilized in ancient warfare by various cultures and civilizations. Due to their size and strength, they were used to break through enemy lines or as a platform for archers or other soldiers. The ancient Persians, Indians, Carthaginians, and Romans all made use of elephants in battle. In the game itself, when I looked through the lists, there are 4 main factions that use elephants. They are the Carthaginian and Numidian lists, the Indian lists, such as Indo-Greek, Indo-Parthian, Mountain Indian, and so on, the Greek lists, such as Lysimachid, Macedonian, and this is actually the Macedonian 320 BC list, which is one of my favourite armies. I often used to take this army out into battle and tournaments and so on. I also used to really like the Carthaginian lists, especially I think it was Hannibal in Italy. That was one of my favourite lists as well. I think it's the 216 BC list. Those two, they were my favourite. I like this because this is well balanced. You've got your pikes, you've got your warband, elephants, decent cav, skirmishes. It's a really well balanced army, and we'll talk more about this in the second part of the video. Carthage at times used elephants to great success, most notably at Trebia, but it also disastrously backfired at Zama in 202 BC. At Zama, Hannibal charged 80 elephants against Roman lines, but Roman anti-elephant tactics, such as blowing horns to make loud noises, led to a fiasco. The elephants, instead of scattering the Roman lines, turned on the Carthaginians and disordered their left wing, which led to the eventual collapse of the army. However, at the Battle of Bagradas in 240 BC, the charge of the war elephants, supported by cavalry, created mass confusion and fear in the enemy line, which crumbled in front of them. We find a number of examples then of elephants actually causing more harm than good and being ineffective on the battlefield, as well as some of these successes. It was the Roman army which worked out a simple strategy to defeat the elephants and turn the marauding beasts into a liability. Early disasters against the war elephants of Pyrrhus, a Greek military adventurer, taught the Romans harsh lessons, which they learned quickly from. The key tactic devised by the Romans was to switch from a mass of soldiers to a screen of light infantry, who were best armed with javelins. They used these weapons to kill the driver of the elephant, or to panic the elephant and get it moving in the other direction, to get it turned around and panicked, thus running amok amongst its own troops. In conclusion, Elephants were very much hit or miss on the ancient battlefield. Sometimes they could be extremely effective, especially against poorly trained or average quality troops. However, against better trained armies, elephants tended to struggle when attacked in force by skirmishers or held in place by determined foot. This is accurately represented in the game, and we will now examine how elephants can be used in the second part of this video. So now we will look at how elephants perform in the game, and I have done a lot of testing, quite a bit of number crunching, and I was especially interested in how elephants do on impact, because that's where they really become dangerous. For example, against most infantry they are 150 up in POA terms, and so I wanted to see how effective they were at causing disruptions, for example, on impact. So let's have a look at the infantry first. Now, some of this is fairly common sense, but I think also there are some interesting numbers to examine and look at. These units at the back, the pikes, the Romans, and the superior warband, these are the kind of units that really you want to be avoiding when you're trying to use your elephants, because with the Romans and the superior warband, you've got the quality, so that helps them with the cohesion tests. And with the pikes, they're just very effective against elephants in general. And in terms of the stats, the superior warband and the Romans, it's around 16% chance to disrupt. So when you charge an elephant into one of these units, it's a roughly 16% chance to disrupt that unit. And with the pikes, it's a bit lower, it's around 14%. So not that great in terms of the odds. Then you've also got to factor in the melee rounds, and that's where the pikes really come into play, and they are far and away the better unit, or the best unit really, fighting elephants once in melee. It goes to about 26% chance to disrupt an elephant in the melee round for pikes. Really good odds. Whereas against the Romans and the warband, it's around 6%. So only 6% chance to disrupt an elephant in melee for these two, where it's 26% with the pikes. A big difference there. And you see something similar with the citizen hoplites, because also spear are very good in melee against elephants. So even though the impact for the Romans, even with the hastati, they've got the quality, the above average, which helps again with the cohesion tests. It's around 18% chance to disrupt against an elephant, and it's a little bit higher for the hoplites because they're only average quality, so it's about 22% chance for this unit to disrupt against an elephant on the charge, and a little less for the hastati, but the big difference is once in melee. So once in melee, hastati are really poor against elephants. It's only around 2% chance to disrupt an elephant in the melee, whereas with the hoplites, it's about 16% chance. Big difference there. So really, swordsmen are not that great against elephants. Spear pikes are much better. That's what you could always remember. And then we come to some of the worst units for fighting elephants, and this is really good examples of the kind of units you want to be aiming for with your elephant. Warband, they're swordsmen, average qualities, they're around 34% chance to disrupt, about a third of chance to disrupt against elephant on impact, whereas medium foot with spear, it's about 44% chance. Very high chance of disrupting against elephant, because the medium foot don't get that +1 that heavy foot gets. So they're very susceptible to disrupting on receiving a charge from an elephant. So those were the kind of stats for the infantry. For cavalry, the big thing to consider and to remember is that even though Lancers are great units, we've got your Armoured Noble Lancers, and we've got the cheaper Lancers, the Bedu Cav, which is a great unit, really very cost effective, about I think 36. But the problem with Lancers against elephants is that they don't evade. So your standard kind of cavalry, your armoured cav and your noble cav, the light spear cav, on receiving a charge from an elephant, they will evade, which is fantastic because it keeps the elephant occupied, running after them, and you might even be able to turn around and get back to the main battle before the elephant does. So it's great that these units will evade and give you extra time and push this elephant hopefully away from where all the action is, whereas the Lancers will not evade. They will stand and fight, and they will lose, often disrupting on impact. So really you want to keep your Lancers away from elephants. They are not very good against them at all, and it's the same with the heavy chariots. They do not evade against elephants, so you want to keep your Lancers, heavy chariots away. Units like light chariots and the camels, they do evade, which is great. Camels are actually disordered by elephants. I checked that out, but they do evade. So that's fantastic. Skirmishes. So I tested elephants out against skirmishers. I tested archers, slingers, and javelin men. No real difference between all of the different kinds of light foot when firing upon elephants. And I was trying to replicate battlefield conditions. So I had one unit firing while standing, and then the other two units on the half arc firing away. And what I found is that skirmishers are very effective against elephants, and actually quite often there was a disruption even on the first round of fire because you've only got 20. The strength is 20, and if you're getting two, if you're getting two casualties, that's already 10%. So after a few rounds of fire, the elephant was suffering from losses, so that you get that extra -1 on the cohesion test for significant losses. So in terms of the actual stats, it worked out with 3 units firing upon an elephant. I was getting disruptions about 50% of the time. That's what I was getting. And if it was just 2 units firing, it was about 35% of the time I was getting a disruption. So good figures there. And in a battle, you really want to be focusing your skirmishes on elephants because it's highly likely you're going to get some kind of disruption even in the first round of firing. Okay, so that's some of the stats, some tips, and then conclusion. So tips, especially for the newer players who are watching this video, remember that cavalry cannot get any flank attacks on elephants. So you might be getting behind an elephant, you might be very mobile with your cav, and you think, yes, now I can get my flank attack. You can't get any flank attacks on elephants with cavalry, so that's something to bear in mind. You can only do it with infantry. And obviously cavalry gets disordered by cav as well, even friendly cav. So if you're in an adjacent square, even your own cavalry will be disordered by your own elephant unit. The other thing to remember is the CT check. If your elephant routs, then it's the only unit in the game, as far as I know, that causes cohesion tests for your not only adjacent but nearby units for 2 squares all the way round. So it's quite a wide area that all those friendly units within that area will get cohesion tests if your unit routes. So obviously with other units it's only 1 square adjacent, but not so with elephants. I guess replicating the kind of chaos that they caused when they did rout. So bear that in mind. In conclusion, when you are using your elephant in a battle, try to aim for the medium foot. You've got a great chance of disrupting, fragmenting, and routing that kind of unit, and even warband as well. Something like warband there. Swordsmen, basically swordsmen in general do worse than spear and pike. So try to aim for swordsmen, and the average quality one would be best. Focus your skirmisher fire on elephants. You've got a good chance of disrupting an elephant after even one round, and if it's 2 or 3, then it's highly likely you're going to get some disruptions or even fragmentations. And keep your lancers away from elephants, because they do not do well against them. Elephants are pretty hit or miss, but I generally take one out if I've got the option, like with Macedonian 320 list. I think it's the Roman 199 list. A lot of the Greek lists you can take an elephant, and they are quite useful. They are useful against cavalry. If the enemy has cavalry advantage, even one elephant will help, especially because they can't get flanked. So you know, the enemy has to go around the elephant or just try and keep away from it. So that's quite good as a cav counter. Although generally speaking, when I'm using elephants, I tend to keep them in the middle, because that's where I find I can use them most effectively in most battles. Because if they're on the flanks and they're pursuing, then it takes them quite a while to get back to the action. Whereas in the middle, they can, especially if they rout a unit, then they often charge into another unit. So when there's a lot of action going on, a lot of units going on, it's often nice to have an elephant there rather than on the flanks, where they might just be running around in the empty squares with not many units to charge at. Sometimes players put a general in elephants. That might be something to consider. That makes them even more effective. I often don't, but it might be worth considering. You might want to try it out on the battlefield and see what you think. But then you'd get an extra bonus in POA terms, especially on the charge. Okay, there we go. So that's a little snapshot about elephants. Please leave your comments below. Maybe you are an expert at using elephants. Maybe you've got some tips that I haven't mentioned. Please leave your comments below. And thanks a lot for watching, and see you again soon.